Who is the best comic book movie director of all time? In today's YouTube video, we are going to settle that debate once and for all based on my rankings, and I'm going to go through all of them here. Now, the criteria I'm going through is that they've had to directed 3 or more comic book movies to be considered for this ranking. So people that have only done 1 or 2 comic book movies in their career wouldn't really call them a comic book movie director. And if you're new here, I talk about movies every single Tuesday and Friday on this YouTube channel, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So I've seen, rated, and reviewed over 100 comic book movies, but I went through that and found out which directors have directed 3 or more of those, and it left me with this list right here of 12 directors that we're going to rank from worst to best, in my opinion, of course. Now, starting things off in last place is Michael Bay. I'm sorry for all the Michael Bay stans out there and the Transformers fans. As you can see, my number 1 film of his, I loved Transformers 1. I thought it was a great movie, better than some people even give it credit for, but it drops off drastically immediately from there. The Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon is going downhill, and Age of Extinction the Last Night. Just not good movies. He's not a great comic book movie director, but yes, Transformers are comics. They had a comic run. They're from Marvel Comics, so that's why he's included on here. But last place, Michael Bay, 12th. There you go. Now, next in 11th place, we have Peyton Reed, the director of the Ant-Man trilogy, and Quantumania really was bringing this down because I thought the first 2 were fine movies. He's never delivered a great project. He's delivered either a good project or something very bad like Quantumania. So that now leaves us with 12 Michael Bay, 11 Peyton Reed, and we got 10 more to go. So those 2 weren't able to crack the top 10. Who's landing at number 10? Very similar to Peyton Reed is Joss Whedon in terms of the Avengers and Age of Ultron. I thought were very, very good movies. Better than I'd give the Ant-Man movies, obviously, by my ratings. But the Joss Whedon version of the Justice League is so bad. Truly one of the worst comic book movies ever made. And that's dragging him down all the way down to 10. Then we get to number 9 and I have Jon Favreau landing here. Iron Man, the first one, loved that movie. One of the better comic book movies ever made. But Iron Man 2 and 3 I thought were just aggressively average, middle-of-the-road movies, so that's going to bring him down a little bit in his overall rating. Then at number 8, we have Bryan Singer, who's been very hit or miss as well. He's also just a terrible person, but we'll just leave that aside and talk about the movies for now. Days of Future Past, one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. X2 and X-Men, I thought were very solid, nothing incredible, but definitely not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought Apocalypse was putrid. So now we look at our updated rankings here. We got Bay, then Reed, Whedon, Favreau, and Singer, and now we're going to get into our top 7 comic book movie directors. At number 7, we have Sam Raimi. He would have been a lot higher if he didn't make his return to Marvel in the MCU with the Multiverse of Madness, but Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man, I love. Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time. Both those I rate very highly. Spider-Man 3, not a huge fan of. I think it's very middle of the road. Not as bad as some people say, but it's overly long. A lot of weird character decisions. Venom's inclusion was odd. Multiverse of Madness, it was just a huge letdown for me. I just did not like much about that movie at all. Then we get to number 6. Speaking to Spider-Man, we just talked about Raimi. Now we're going to go to the newest trilogy, Tom Holland's trilogy, with Far From Home, No Way Home, Homecoming. Homecoming is my favorite of the bunch. I think a lot of people would have No Way Home tops. Some people either love or hate Far From Home. I'm more in the hate camp, even though 6.3 is not a terrible score, but I just don't really like much about it. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is really awkward and weird in the MCU. I just don't think he fits well, and Mysterio is just not a great villain. Didn't get much of Tom Holland's identity in this series until really the final 10 minutes of No Way Home, and then I finally feel like he got himself his own identity. But now we're getting down to our top 5. So we have Jon Watts, Sam Raimi, Bryan Singer, Jon Favreau, Joss Whedon, Peyton Reed, and Michael Bay, going from 6 to 12, and now we're getting to the final 5 comic book movie directors. And in the 5 slot is, I was going to say the one with the biggest cult following, but we still have Christopher Nolan to go here, but I'd still say Zack Snyder's cult following is a little higher than Christopher Nolan's, which is hard to top, but he does. And I think Zack Snyder's Justice League is absolutely incredible. I love that movie so much. Man of Steel as well, huge fan of. Watchmen, admittedly, I need a rewatch. I thought it was great when I watched it, but I think I need another rewatch to truly appreciate it. I think that score is going to go up on rewatch, whereas Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice I think might go down on rewatch, but overall I think he's very solid. A lot of people hate this guy with a passion. I don't think he deserves that. A lot of people love this guy and think everything he's touched is gold. Don't think he deserves that much praise either. I think he's just a very, very good comic book movie director. He's landing at the 5 slot here. Number 4, we have Matthew Vaughn, who not only delivered X-Men First Class, which is one of my favorite X-Men movies, one of my favorite Marvel movies of all time, but the Kingsman trilogy, which other than the Kingsman, which I didn't love, I love the Secret Service, and I think I'm higher in the Golden Circle than most people, which is what he followed up the first Kingsman with. Love the Kingsman movies. Can't wait to see more of that. I hope Eggsy makes a return. But on top of that, just a cherry on top with X-Men First Class being part of his filmography as well. All right, we just have the final 3 that remain. And if you're keeping track at home, you know that the 3 people left are Christopher Nolan, the Russo Brothers, and James Gunn for the best comic book movie director of all time. We got 4 through 12 listed here. Let's unveil who's at number 3. And at number 3 is where James Gunn lands. Guardians 2, I just noticed my graphic doesn't show a score there, but I give that a 7.5 out of 10, so he's really never missed. 7.5 being and his floor is crazy. I will give him a little bump though. He's landing at 3 just based on aggregate average of the 4 movies. Because of Suicide Squad, I think I'm lower on the most. But averaging those 4, I didn't include the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special or Peacemaker because that's a TV show and a special. Like, we're just sticking to movies in general. But I'm going to give him a bump because all of these movies, the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, all the Guardians movies, these are all characters that people just did not know about or care about before starting. I guess Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn you knew, but other than that, no one knew any of these people. And the fact that he could take these people that no one knew, no one cared about, and made them so lovable, endearing, and people that became instant favorites for the fans, including myself, he has really been able to take the source material of these comics and transform them into something so beloved. So even though he's landing at number 3 in the aggregate, I truly think he deserves to be considered the greatest comic book movie director of all time because he has such a harder job than the other two. The other two left are the Russo Brothers and Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan, we'll talk about him when we get there, and then the Russo Brothers, well, like they get the Avengers, big bad Infinity War and Endgame movies, and Civil War, which is a team-up movie. So James Gunn alone, like he takes characters that people don't know, don't care about, and makes them so loved. That's why I think he really deserves credit for really being considered the greatest of all time. Even though on aggregate we're putting him at 3, and I'm going to keep him at 3, but I'm going to say like there's a strong argument to be made that he should be number 1. So now all we have left is the Russo Brothers and Christopher Nolan to finish off our rankings. Who's going to come in at number 2? Let's go. And that is Christopher Nolan, and that's probably because I'm lower on the Dark Knight trilogy than most, which isn't saying much because I still give it a 9.4, 9.2, 7.8, which are great scores, but a lot of people call these 10 out of 10s. Christopher Nolan is without a doubt one of the greatest directors of all time and one of the greatest blockbuster directors of all time. And what he did here with reviving the comic book movie by making these blockbuster events are getting $1 billion+ and being must-see appointment movie viewing for fans to go to the theater opening night and see. He's a fantastic director, but is he a fantastic comic book movie director? He made great comic book movies, but is he really adapting comic book movies to a T here, or is he taking characters that we know from comic books and turning them into cinematic movies? Like, is he the best at adapting comic books into movies? Probably not. Is he the best at making awesome cinematic movies that people love to see? Of course, and using Batman as the fuel for that with the Joker and Two-Face and Bane worked out perfectly. Amazing movies, nothing really negative to say about them, but just saying like I give James Gunn a little more credit in terms of taking characters people don't know, whereas Christopher Nolan just basically built a movie around IP that people already know. Number 1 is the Russo Brothers, though, based on aggregate score. The lowest they've ever gone is 8.8, and their ceiling of it 9.6 for Infinity War is my favorite Marvel movie ever. So yeah, they're going to be number 1 on this list based on the average score, but Winter Soldier had Black Widow in it, but we'll call Captain America Winter Soldier the most self-contained movie they've done because Civil War was basically just an Avengers movie. Avengers Infinity War and Endgame was a conclusion of a decade-long saga. Obviously, they had it life on easy mode here. I think any director could have taken those scripts and those movies and those ideas and bringing all those together and made a good movie. Obviously, they took it and did it very well, made fantastic movies. But I'm going to say they had things probably the easiest of any director in terms of the source material they were given. But they're going to be number 1 because, yeah, they still had an easy job, but they still had to execute, and they did execute. And even though they're terrible directors outside of the MCU, they're great comic book movie directors, and they land number 1 on my list. So there you have it, the final rankings from the Russo Brothers down to Michael Bay of the greatest comic book movie directors of all time. As I mentioned earlier, James Gunn, I give a boost because he took characters that we don't really know about and made them lovable. Russo Brothers had life on easy street. Matthew Vaughn, I give similar credit to James Gunn in terms of First Class really rejuvenated that X-Men franchise. And on top of that, the Kingsman, no one knew about those comics before this, and he made those very beloved. Zack Snyder has built a crazy cult following, so good on him. John Watts introduced Spider-Man to the MCU, and he probably got a lot of studio intervention with making it have to be with Iron Man and all that stuff, and there's a Sony war going on in terms of who owns the rights to him. So John Watts, I think there's just a lot of intervention there. Sam Raimi, you would have been higher if he didn't come back for Multiverse of Madness, but you had a lot of stylistic flair in that movie. I just think the movie itself kind of stunk. Bryan Singer, terrible person. Movies, run the gambit. Jon Favreau, kicked off the MCU, can never give you enough credit for that with Iron Man, but after that really went downhill. Joss Whedon, man, what was Justice League, man? What was it? Peyton Reed, I don't know if I want you to come back after Quantumania. That was rough. I know a lot of it was Jeff Loveness with the writing, but yeah, yikes. And then Michael Bay, you make cool explosion movies. You make fun popcorn movies, but in terms of plot, I don't think you've ever known what a plot is, but that's fine. I mean, they're fun movies, just not good movies. But with that, I upload videos every Tuesday and Friday, like I said, so if you want to stick around for more movie content, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.